The small town of Millfield, Ohio, fell asleep early in 2025. Even though self-driving cars glided silently down the streets and every coffee shop had high-speed Wi-Fi, the pace of life here still held a characteristic Midwestern tranquility. The November night descended, bringing with it the biting cold of the coming winter and a nearly absolute silence, broken only occasionally by the distant wail of a train whistle in the attic room of a Victorian-style house. Emily Green was running her hands through her blonde hair in frustration. Light from her laptop screen illuminated the 16-year-old's face, highlighting her wide, panicked green eyes. "No, no, no," Emily muttered, her hands covering her face. "Please don't tell me." Her American history report, the research project that Mr. Harris had emphasized, was worth 30% of the final grade, was still sitting neatly in a blue folder, safely tucked away in her desk drawer at Millfield High School. Forgetfulness, what her mom jokingly called her goldfish brain, had become an inseparable part of Emily. It was the cause of countless trips back to school to retrieve things, detentions for late assignments, or blank stares when friends reminded her of a plan she herself had proposed. But this time was different. The deadline was 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. If she showed up to class empty-handed, the prospect of an F and a phone call home from Mr. Harris was crystal clear. Emily bit her lip, her heart pounding. She couldn't bear to think of her parents' disappointed faces. They always said they trusted her to be responsible. And now, her responsibility was lying a mile away, in a locked building now. She had to get it back. Right now, the crazy idea flashed through Emily's mind like a bolt of lightning. Sneaking out of the house at 10 at night, breaking into the school. It sounded like the plot of an 80s teen movie. But the fear of an F and disappointing her parents was greater than her fear of the dark acting faster than she could think. Emily stealthily changed out of her pajamas and into a pair of jeans and a thick hoodie. She grabbed the small flashlight from her desk, checked the batteries, and quickly stuffed it into her pocket. But as soon as her hand touched the doorknob, a wave of loneliness and fear washed over her. Go into the huge, silent school in the dead of night by herself? No, she wasn't brave enough. Emily needed in a lie. She peeked through the window curtain, looking at the house across the street. The light in Alex's window was still on. Alex Hayes, her neighbor of the same age, was the complete opposite of Emily. If Emily was a noisy whirlwind, Alex was the silence of a deep forest. He was quiet, an excellent student, and always kept a certain distance from everyone. Though they had lived next door to each other since childhood, their relationship was limited to polite nods. But in this situation, Alex was her only option. He was smart, calm, and most importantly, he would never snitch. Emily carefully opened the window, and the cold night air rushed in immediately. She grabbed a handful of chestnuts from a bowl on her desk. She threw one at Alex's window pane. A sharp clack rang out. A few seconds later, Alex's silhouette appeared. He pulled back the curtain, his angular face and black-rimmed glasses showing surprise. Emily gestured for Alex to open his window. She whispered across the small leaf-strewn yard that separated their houses, "Alex, help me." "What is it, Emily?" Alex's voice was low and steady, almost devoid of emotion. I left something at school, a really important report. Can you go with me?" Emily clasped her hands together, her face pleading. Alex frowned. He glanced at the clock on his wall, then back at Emily's near tearful face. A flicker of hesitation crossed his eyes. Breaking into the school at night was a violation of the rules, something a model student like Alex would never do, but there was a strange power in Emily's eyes. 10 minutes, Alex said curtly before closing the curtain. Emily let out a sigh of relief. With Alex coming along, her fear was cut in half. 10 minutes later, they met at the end of the street. The night wind blew, carrying a biting chill that seeped into their skin. The town at night was completely different from the daytime. The streets were deserted, with only the dim orange-yellow glow of the streetlights stretching the shadows of the trees into strange, distorted shapes on the asphalt. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Alex asked, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his bomber jacket. His breath formed a thin wisp of smoke in the cold air. "Positive. I don't have any other choice," Emily replied, her voice trembling slightly from the cold and anxiety. She felt guilty for lying to her parents that she was going to her room to read, and now she was dragging Alex into this mess. They walked in silence. Millfield High School appeared at the end of the road, a massive red brick building that looked like a sleeping fortress during the day. It was always noisy and bustling, but at night, it was silent and intimidating. The main gate was locked tight. Alex led Emily around to the back, where a side door led to the gym area. "This door sometimes doesn't latch properly," Alex whispered, trying the doorknob. The door swung open with a soft click. They slipped inside. The air inside the school was even colder than outside. The smell of polished floors and old books lingered in the air. The wide hallway was dark and cavernous, flanked by rows of metal lockers standing silent like sentinels. Moonlight streamed through the large windows high above, creating silvery patches of light across the floor, making everything look surreal. "My classroom is on the second floor," Emily whispered, turning on her flashlight. The white beam swept across the lockers, the posters on the walls, and then settled on the staircase. "Turn it off," Alex reminded her softly. "The janitor might be on patrol." Emily quickly switched off the light. It took a moment for her eyes to readjust to the darkness. They hugged the wall, moving carefully. It felt like they were in a real heist. The long hallway seemed endless. The glass panes on the classroom doors reflected the moonlight, looking like soulless eyes watching their every step. Emily instinctively grabbed onto the sleeve of Alex's jacket. I'm a little scared," she confessed. Alex didn't say anything, but Emily could feel his hand clenching inside his jacket pocket. His face in the moonlight looked unnaturally calm, but his eyes behind his glasses glinted with high alert. He was hiding his own unease. They went up the stairs. Their footsteps echoed loudly in the silent space. Wind whistled through the cracks in the windows, creating strange sounds, sometimes high, sometimes low, like someone whispering. "Do you hear that?" Emily whispered, her voice cracking. "It sounds like someone is talking." "It's just the wind," Alex reassured her, though he too felt that something was off. The cold here wasn't just the cold of the weather. It was a cold that seeped deep into the bones, a cold that came from the emptiness and gloom of the place. They finally reached Mr. Harris's history classroom. Luckily, the door was unlocked. Alex pushed it gently, and the door swung open without a sound inside. The darkness was even thicker than in the hallway. Emily turned her flashlight back on, sweeping it around the room, the familiar desks and chairs, the whiteboard still bearing notes from the last class. Everything was silent. "Let me look," Emily said, shining the flashlight towards her desk near the window. She walked, trying not to make a sound. Alex stood at the door, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. It wasn't coming from any particular direction, but seemed to emanate from every corner of the darkness, from the cold walls, from the empty rows of desks. Emily bent down, shining the light into her desk drawer. Her heart leaped when she saw the blue folder lying there neatly. "Found it," she whispered triumphantly, quickly stuffing it into her backpack. "Mission accomplished." A wave of relief washed over Emily. "Let's go." They quickly left the classroom, closing the door carefully behind them. But as they stepped back into the hallway, the vague sense of unease from before suddenly intensified. The wind still whistled intermittently, but this time, Emily could have sworn she heard an indistinct whisper within it. A sound that was not natural. She glanced timidly at Alex and saw that he was also standing still. Listening, his eyes narrowed, focusing on the pitch-black space at the end of the hall. "We should get out of here. Fast," Alex said, his voice losing its usual calmness for the first time. They walked faster, almost running. "Are you sure that was just the wind?" Emily asked, her voice breaking into a trembling whisper. They had left the classroom, but the sense of unease clung to them like a shadow. What else could it be? Alex replied, trying to sound logical, but even he couldn't shake the creepy feeling running down his spine. "This building is old. It's just wind blowing through the cracks." They stood in the thick darkness of the second-floor hallway. Emily's flashlight flickered, casting distorted beams of light on the rows of lockers, making them look like metal coffins. Alex's face, appearing and disappearing in the faint light, looked pale and tense. "But it sounded so real," Emily insisted. "Like someone was very far away." She squeezed Alex's arm, an unconscious gesture seeking comfort. His hand was cold, his palm damp with sweat. He was clearly scared too. "Maybe we should just go," Alex said, pulling Emily towards the staircase. But curiosity, a dangerous and irresistible emotion, had begun to stir within Emily. Her initial fear was gradually giving way to a strange excitement. "Wait a second," she said. "Have you ever heard of the locked room?" Alex stopped. "You mean that stupid rumor on the school forum?" "It's not stupid," Emily protested. Sarah said her older sister, who graduated 2 years ago, told her that room has been locked for a very long time. The room at the end of this hallway. She pointed her flashlight beam towards the end of the hall, where the darkness seemed to thicken. "People say it has 4 locks, and sometimes strange noises come from inside. Some people have even seen a shadow move past the small glass window on the door." "Those are just ghost stories made up to scare freshmen, Emily," Alex dismissed, though his voice wavered slightly. "There's always a haunted room or a ghost in the library in every high school. It's just a product of imagination." "But you've heard of it, right?" Emily pressed Alex's side. "Yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't believe it." Suddenly, a sharp thud echoed from the end of the hallway, right where they were looking. They both froze, their hearts seeming to stop. That sound was not the wind. It was clear, distinct, as if someone had just dropped something on the floor. "What was that?" Emily stammered, her hand shaking so much the flashlight beam danced wildly on the wall. Alex didn't answer. He squinted, trying to see through the darkness. Silence enveloped them, heavy and suffocating. The air seemed to drop a few degrees. It was probably just a rat," Alex said after a long pause, but his explanation sounded weak. "A rat the size of a person?" Emily shot back, her voice filled with panic. "Alex, I think someone is in here." They stood motionless for a few more seconds, listening. There was only the sound of their own hearts pounding in their chests and the wind whistling outside. "All right, let's go this way," Alex said abruptly, pulling Emily in the opposite direction, toward a secondary staircase in the middle of the hallway. "This way will be faster." Emily knew he was lying. The main staircase was closer, but it would force them to walk past the source of the noise. The path Alex chose was a detour, but it would lead them through a different hallway, a shorter and less frightening one. The only problem was, That hallway was right next to the locked room. They moved quickly and silently. As they turned into the short hallway, Emily could see it, the dark wooden door at the end of the hall. Completely different from the other metal classroom doors, it had no nameplate, only a small rectangular glass window that had been painted black. From the inside, and just as the rumors said, there were 4 padlocks dangling from a large iron hasp, all of them rusted with time as they passed by. Alex, who was on the outside, accidentally brushed his hand against the door. He stopped abruptly, pulling his hand back as if he'd been shocked. "What's wrong?" Emily asked in a whisper. "The door," Alex said, his face a mask of astonishment and disbelief. "It's warm? Warm?" Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" "It's actually warm," Alex repeated, still staring at the door as if it were a living creature. "In a freezing building like this, how can a wooden door be warm?" Alex's logical skepticism seemed to be shaken. He slowly reached out his hand, hesitated, then pressed his palm against the wooden surface. His eyes widened behind his glasses. "No way!" Driven by curiosity, Emily did the same. She pressed her hand against the door. Alex was right. The door had a strange warmth to it, not hot, but distinctly warmer than the surrounding air temperature. It felt as if a faint heat source was radiating from within. Only logical explanation was that there was a heating system or some electrical device running inside. But why would an abandoned room, sealed with 4 locks, need heating? Emily's initial fear had now completely transformed into intense curiosity. Rumors, the strange noise, and now the unusually warm door. Everything connected, forming an irresistible mystery. "We have to see what's inside," Emily said, her voice full of determination. A strange smile appeared on her lips, an attempt to hide her rising fear. "Are you crazy?" Alex objected. "It's locked. 4 locks. We need to go, right now." "Just a peek through the window," Emily pleaded. "It'll be quick. Maybe the paint has peeled off somewhere." Alex hesitated. His reason told him to get out of there immediately, but a part of him, the curious part he always tried to suppress, was drawn in. He wanted to know the answer too. Why was this door warm? "Fine," he agreed reluctantly, "but just for a minute." They approached the door. Emily shone her flashlight on the small glass window. The black paint was thick, but just as she had hoped, time had caused it to crack in a few places. There was a small crack in the bottom corner, just big enough to peer through. Emily pressed her eye to the crack, her heart racing. Alex stood right behind her, holding his breath. "See anything?" he asked. "It's too dark," Emily whispered. "No, wait. There's something." And then they heard Ida click. The sound came from right behind them. They spun around. Emily's flashlight beam cut a panicked arc down the hallway. No one was there, but one thing had changed. The door to Mr. Harris's history classroom, the door they were certain they had closed, was now wide open. Asterisk. For a moment, frozen in fear, Emily and Alex could only stare at the wide open door of the history classroom. At the end of the hall, it looked like a gaping black mouth, silently mocking their panic. Someone opened it," Emily stammered, her voice barely audible. "Impossible." Alex countered, but the conviction in his voice was gone. "We closed it. I'm sure of it." They had closed it. They both remembered clearly. After Emily got her report, it was Alex who had carefully shut the door to avoid making a sound. So why was it open now? Reason screamed at them to run, to get out of this cursed place immediately. But an invisible pull, a morbid curiosity, held them rooted to the spot. They had to know. Maybe it's the janitor. Emily suggested, trying to cling to a rational explanation. He's making his rounds and heard us. Then where's his light? And why didn't he call out to us? Alex said, dismissing the theory. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. Stay here. Before Emily could protest, Alex tiptoed towards the classroom. His body tense as a drawn bowstring. Emily could only hold her breath. Following his every step with her flashlight beam, the light danced across the floor, on the rows of lockers, creating long, grotesque shadows. Alex reached the classroom door and cautiously peered inside. He stood there for a few seconds, then turned back, shaking his head. No one's there, he said when he returned to Emily's side. Everything's exactly the same. That only made things more terrifying. No one. The door had opened by itself. I don't get it, Emily said, her hand tightening around the flashlight. This makes no sense. The feeling of being watched returned, more intense than ever. They were no longer alone in this school, whether it was a person or something else. It was playing with them. Let's go, Alex said firmly. Right now. This time, Emily didn't object. She'd had enough excitement for one night. They turned their backs on the history classroom and quickly headed for the secondary staircase. But as they passed the locked room again, Emily glanced at it instinctively, and her heart skipped a beat. Alex, she called softly, tugging at his jacket. What now? Alex snapped, clearly on edge. Look. Alex followed her pointed finger. The dark wooden door, the door that had been sealed with 4 rusted padlocks, was now ajar. A small gap, just wide enough for the deep darkness within to seep out. The 4 padlocks were still there, but they were no longer locked onto the hasp, instead dangling uselessly from the bolt. It had been unlocked silently. While they were distracted by the classroom door, they both stood frozen. Even the whistling wind outside seemed to fall silent. This was not a prank. This was not a coincidence. Some force was leading them on, inviting them to step inside. No, Alex muttered. No way. He grabbed Emily's hand, intending to pull her away, but Emily didn't move. The fear inside her was still there, but it was now mixed with an irresistible curiosity. The mystery of this room, of the warm door, of the self-opening locks, had completely captivated her. We have to go inside, she said, her voice so resolute it surprised even herself. Are you out of your mind? Alex exclaimed in an angry whisper. This is a trap. Someone's in there. If there was someone, they wouldn't be doing things so secretly, Emily reasoned. And if this is a trap, I want to know why. She pulled her hand free from Alex's and walked towards the door. Alex hesitated for a moment, his face torn between fear and concern for Emily. Finally, he let out a helpless sigh and followed her. Emily pushed the door gently with her fingertips. It swung open in an eerie silence, not a single creak. The air from inside wafted out, carrying the scent of dust and the mustiness of a place long forgotten. She shone her flashlight inside. The room was disappointingly empty. No tables, no chairs, nothing. Just a rectangular space with peeling walls and a floor covered in the thick layer of dust. Dust motes danced in the air, glittering in the flashlight beam like a swarm of ghostly fireflies. But one thing stood out amidst the emptiness. Against the opposite wall was a large mirror, reaching from the floor to nearly the ceiling. With a tarnished, intricately carved wooden frame, the mirror's surface was clouded with dust, but it was still clear enough to reflect their distorted images. Emily stepped inside, with Alex close behind. The door swung shut behind them, trapping them in darkness and silence. There's nothing here, Alex said, his voice echoing in the empty room. He started walking around, shining his flashlight on the floor, looking for any sign that someone had been there. Asterisk.